At a quiet family dinner in Franklin, everything snapped. One moment I was passing the mashed potatoes, the next my parents looked straight at me and said, "Nobody needs your money or you." The room went still. My sister nodded, almost relieved to finally say it out loud. I stayed silent, only quietly doing things they never expected. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Silence became my shield because while they thought they were cutting me out, they had no idea what that silence really meant or what I was about to do next. Growing up, Franklin had never been easy. Our small house smelled like motor oil from Dad's work clothes and fabric softener from Mom's quilts. Money was tight, even the walls seemed to hold their breath. I remember nights when overdue bills stacked up, Mom whispering worries, Dad pacing the hallway, and me pretending to sleep while listening through the thin drywall. By high school, I was winning coding competitions, dreaming of life bigger than Franklin, a life where past due notices and cold dinners weren't my reality. Leaving for San Francisco on a scholarship, I carried more than luggage. I carried a promise to protect my family, especially my younger sister, Madison. Over the years, I quietly sent money, fixed what needed fixing, supported her boutique, even gave her an SUV. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. That night, at the dinner table, all that unseen effort collided with their practiced cruelty. Dad's fork froze midair. Mom's voice slid out smooth, rehearsed, "Or you, Stefan." Madison echoed it like a seal, "Nobody needs your money or you." I didn't stand there in shock. I didn't break. I stayed silent because I knew silence wasn't surrender. It was the beginning of my pushback. And trust me, none of them saw what was coming next. The night air outside was sharp, biting, but it felt better than the suffocating silence inside the dining room. I leaned against my car, taking slow breaths. Franklin felt smaller than ever, yet heavier on my chest. Every memory of their expectations, every quiet sacrifice I'd made, pressed down like bricks. I had given them everything, and tonight, they finally said it didn't matter. Nobody needed me. Not my money. Not me. The words echoed in my skull like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. I felt the sting, yes, but also clarity. Years of guilt, of quiet labor to hold this family together, suddenly made sense. I was invisible until they wanted something, and even then, they took without gratitude. I pulled out my phone. Elena's name flashed on the screen. She knew me too well. "Stefan, what happened?" Her voice was cautious, almost bracing. I swallowed, letting the cold air clear my thoughts. "Check Madison's Instagram," I said quietly. "Everything's not as it seems." Scrolling through her posts, my stomach sank. Madison smiled in her boutique photos, proudly declaring herself self-made. Every post, every caption, ignored the SUV I had bought, the loan I had co-signed, the countless payments I'd quietly handled. It was all invisible to the world, except to me. Anger bubbled, but beneath it, a strange calm emerged. I wasn't powerless. I hadn't been erased, I had just been overlooked. And if they thought my silence meant submission, they were about to find out how wrong they were. I opened my laptop. Step 1, the SUV. Still under my name. Step 2, the boutique loan. Co-signed and carefully managed. Step 3, the invisible hand I'd held over their lives for years. It was time to let them feel what I had felt. Not cruelty. Not revenge. Clarity. Boundaries. Actions with consequences. Tonight, Franklin would learn what happens when silence becomes strategy. By sunrise, the city lights of San Francisco felt like freedom, but Franklin's weight still clung to me. I brewed coffee, staring at the laptop, each keystroke deliberate. The SUV, Madison's prized possession, still sat in her driveway, but legally, it was mine. The boutique loan, the invisible safety net I'd built over years, hung in my control. I thought about that dinner again. Every sharp word, every cold glance, every "nobody needs you" echoed like a challenge. And I realized they weren't rejecting me. They were daring me to act. An act I would. I drafted an email to the bank about the loan. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't angry anymore. I was precise. Every word was calculated, every pause intentional. Click. Sent. Just like that, the first domino fell. Next, the SUV. I called the dealership, calm, professional. "Yes, I'm the titled owner. Please repossess today." The manager hesitated. I didn't falter. "No notice. Retrieve it today." The sense of release was immediate. Not triumph, not spite, just the satisfaction of reclaiming what had been mine to begin with. Messages poured in. Elena's texts, frantic and cautious, reminded me that the storm I was brewing wasn't just personal, it was about to spill into the town itself. Franklin loved gossip almost as much as it loved appearances. Madison's carefully crafted image, the self-made star of the community, was about to crack. I paused, looking out my window at the awakening city. The sunlight cut through the haze, golden and sharp, like the clarity that had finally settled inside me. No more guilt. No more invisible labor. No more carrying a family that never saw me. And yet, I wasn't done. Actions have consequences. Silence had been my shield, now it became my weapon. Franklin wouldn't see it coming. They'd underestimated me for too long. Tonight, they would learn the cost of erasing someone who had quietly. By mid-morning, Franklin was waking up, unaware that the foundation of its favorite story was quietly collapsing. I didn't rush to confront Madison, not yet. Instead, I watched, patient, letting the subtle chaos unfold. My laptop pinged constantly with updates from Elena. The SUV had been towed, the dealership confirmed. The bank had received my instructions on the boutique loan. Every piece of my invisible work, the support they claimed as mine, was quietly unraveling. Memories of that family dinner haunted me. Dad's stiff nod, Mom's practiced sigh, Madison's sharp, almost rehearsed words, "Nobody needs you." Back then, my chest had tightened, my heart sank, but now I felt something else. Control. Clarity. The silence I'd held for years wasn't weakness, it was a strategy. I pulled up Madison's boutique social media. Post after post of her smiling, self-made, proud, glowing as if her success was solely hers. The irony was bitter, yet satisfying. People praised her, unknowingly standing on the support I had silently provided for years. The realization hit like a shockwave, the world had celebrated a carefully built illusion. I checked my phone again. Elena's messages were urgent. People are talking. Some are noticing inconsistencies. Madison's posts are raising eyebrows. Franklin whispers are spreading. A small, cold smile crept across my face. It wasn't revenge I sought, it was truth. Franklin, with its coffee shop gossip and parking lot judgments, would finally see the story as it really was. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about my own life. For years, I had been a fixer, a silent provider, carrying the weight of a family too blind to acknowledge it. Now, the balance had shifted. For the first time in years, I was just Stefan. Not the safety net, not the bank, not the problem solver. Just me. By noon, the boutique began to falter. Elena called again. Madison was panicking, Scott was furious. And me? I stayed calm, a silent observer. Actions have consequence. By the afternoon, the boutique was in chaos. I didn't need to be there to watch it unfold, the threads I had quietly cut were already unraveling. Elena's texts kept coming, urgent and clipped. Stefan, Madison's panicking. Scott's yelling. People are talking. I didn't rush. I didn't feel the need. Years of being the family's silent backbone had taught me patience, and now, it was my ally. I sat back in my hotel room, staring at the sunlight filtering through the blinds. The calm was deceptive. Franklin would soon be buzzing with gossip, but I remained unmoved. For years, I'd been invisible, expected to fix everything without recognition, without thanks. Every bill I paid, every repair I arranged, every loan quietly covered, they believed it was charity, but it was love. And love without boundaries had limits. Madison had built her image, polished and perfect, while I stayed hidden, the real foundation behind her success. And yet, no one ever saw it. Today, they would. Elena sent screenshots, comments from neighbors and friends, confused questions, whispers of doubt. The cracks in Madison's facade were beginning to show. I thought back to that dinner, Dad's nod, Mom's dismissive tone, Madison's cold words. That moment had broken something, yes, but it had also awakened clarity. I was done being their safety net. Done hiding behind silence that they misread as weakness. This wasn't revenge, it was recognition of my time, my effort, and my boundaries. Hours passed. The boutique's posts went unnoticed by most, but the ones who paid attention started connecting the dots. Realizations dawned. Whispers became chatter. Franklin's small-town scrutiny was alive, and the story they had believed for years was crumbling. I stretched, letting a rare smile cross my face. No shouting, no confrontation. Just truth, quietly, inevitably, moving through the cracks I had exposed. And for the first time in years, Stefan, just me, was free. By evening, Franklin was buzzing, but not in the way Madison had expected. The boutique, once her crown jewel, felt smaller, fragile. Elena's updates kept coming, short bursts of chaos. Stefan, Scott is furious. Madison's crying in the office. Neighbors are asking questions. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Years of silently fixing every problem had taught me one thing: I could watch without reacting, and now I would. I opened my laptop again, checking the SUV repossession confirmation. The black vehicle Madison had flaunted for months was legally back under my name. I didn't gloat. I felt a strange calm instead, a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Each document I had sent, each payment I had made, each loan quietly arranged, it all had a purpose. But now, the purpose had shifted. I wasn't doing it for anyone else anymore. Madison had grown used to seeing me as her invisible supporter, the shadow behind her success. That illusion was unraveling. She had thrived on control, on the narrative she fed the town. And yet, in this unraveling, I saw clarity, not chaos. I realized how often I had muted my own life, my own voice, to keep hers perfect. That silence was no longer mine to give. Hours blurred as I prepared for the next move. Bank emails, dealership confirmations, all lined up. Everything Madison believed was hers alone was now being acknowledged for what it truly was, shared, intertwined with my unseen effort. Franklin would talk. Rumors would spread. People would begin questioning, piecing together the truth that had been hidden behind Madison's carefully crafted story. I leaned back, letting the quiet sink in. No confrontation, no shouting matches. Just consequences, the natural fallout of years of unrecognized labor and silent sacrifice. And in that quiet, I felt an unfamiliar sense of control. Stefan, the silent supporter, had finally stepped into his own narrative. Tomorrow, Franklin would wake to the reality I had set in motion. But tonight... Morning light poured through my hotel window, pale and steady, like a reminder that the world didn't wait for anyone's drama. Franklin would be buzzing soon, but for now, the city felt distant, quiet. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through Elena's updates. Each message painted a scene of Madison scrambling, calls, texts, and neighbors whispering behind raised eyebrows. She had built her empire on stories, but stories are fragile when the truth sneaks in. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. The anger had turned into precision, strategy. Every payment I had made, every loan, every hidden effort, it wasn't gone, it was about to demand recognition. The SUV, the boutique loan, all quietly pulled from my name, were symbols of a boundary I had drawn. Years of being the silent supporter had ended. For the first time, I controlled the narrative. Franklin's small-town gossip machine would start turning, and Madison's carefully curated image would crack under scrutiny. Her boutique, her self-made story, every Instagram post, suddenly, they were all part of a story she couldn't fully own. And yet, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. Free from carrying everyone else's expectations, free from being the invisible hand behind their successes. I drafted a mental checklist for the day, monitor bank confirmations, track any boutique responses, and, most importantly, watch Madison's next move. Not to confront her, not to lecture, but to witness. Years of silence had taught me the value of observation. Every misstep, every reaction, every carefully hidden panic would reveal her truth. Stefan wasn't the angry sibling. He was the one who had quietly held everything together, invisible but indispensable. And now, the invisible was visible. The day ahead promised chaos for Madison, but clarity for me. The town would whisper, Franklin would speculate, but I would move forward, unbound by their illusions. I finished my coffee, letting the warmth settle. Freedom tasted different, sharper, clearer. By mid-morning, Franklin was already buzzing. Texts from Elena popped up constantly, updates on Madison's reactions, local gossip spreading like wildfire. I didn't respond immediately. Watching silently had always been my strength. Years of being overlooked had taught me that timing was everything. The more she tried to cover her panic, the more obvious it became. Stefan didn't need to shout, didn't need to force confrontation. The quiet truth was far more powerful than any argument. Madison's boutique posts, once carefully staged to show her independence, were now riddled with gaps and contradictions. Comments from friends and customers started raising questions. How had she managed to afford renovations, new inventory, that shiny SUV? People who once applauded her resilience began whispering, trying to piece together the reality behind the fairy tale. I leaned back in my chair at the hotel, letting the silence stretch. This was the payoff of years spent in the shadows, years of sending money, fixing problems, and staying unseen. Now, the unseen was seen. The irony wasn't lost on me. For decades, I had been the one ensuring everything ran smoothly, holding the family together, while everyone assumed it was natural or easy. Now, I wasn't just stepping away, I was allowing reality to reveal itself. Elena called. Her voice was cautious, almost protective. "Stefan, you sure you're okay with all this?" she asked. I let out a slow breath. I didn't need validation. I was steady, unshaken. "I'm more than okay," I said. It's time she faces the truth, and so does everyone else. Checking my phone again, I saw Madison posting a story, a short video smiling at the camera, her boutique in the background. But the sparkle in her eyes was gone. Panic and disbelief flickered for just a moment before she masked it with practiced confidence. The facade was cracking, and everyone watching could sense it, even if they didn't know why. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at. By noon, the town was buzzing. Franklin's coffee shops and streets carried whispers, the quiet storm of Madison's unraveling spreading fast. Stefan didn't rush, he watched carefully, letting the situation unfold. Every story post, every comment, revealed cracks in the image she'd carefully built. Madison tried to hide panic, smiling for the camera, but the tension in her eyes betrayed her. Friends started questioning, noticing inconsistencies in her success story. Stefan felt a strange calm, the kind that comes from years of being the silent supporter, the one everyone assumed would always be there. Elena called again, cautious. "Stefan, are you sure about this?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "I've waited long enough," he replied. "It's time the truth shows itself." Stefan watched Madison in her boutique from a distance. Her movements, once confident, were now sharp, uncertain. Orders, deliveries, all the threads of her business carefully tied together by his support, were now under pressure. The quiet reckoning had begun. No anger. No celebration. Just clarity. Stefan had stepped out of the shadows and was finally claiming the life and recognition he had long been denied. The town would see the truth soon enough, and Madison would have to face what had been hidden for years. By late afternoon, Franklin's gossip was a wildfire. Stefan checked his phone, screenshots, posts, messages. Madison's boutique, once a symbol of her self-made success, was now under scrutiny. People who once praised her were questioning how much of it was truly hers. Inside Thread and Willow, Madison's composure cracked. She argued with Scott, desperate, trying to explain, but the evidence was clear. Stefan stayed outside, silent. He didn't need to intervene. The consequences of years of hidden support, ignored and erased, were playing out perfectly. Elena watched him quietly. "It's happening," she whispered. Stefan nodded, eyes fixed on Madison. No revenge, just truth. He had carried their burdens for years, now it was time they carried their own. Every post, every comment, every whispered doubt in Franklin was a reminder his silence had power. And for the first time in a long time, Stefan didn't feel the weight of their expectations. He felt free, steady, untouchable, not because he'd taken revenge, but because he had finally stopped being invisible. Stefan sat in his car across from Thread and Willow, watching Madison crumble. Scott hovered, confused and angry, trying to make sense of the mess. Stefan didn't move. He didn't need to. Every unpaid loan, every SUV repossessed, every silent payment he'd sent home, they were all invisible threads he had quietly untied. Madison's panic grew. Why would you do this?" she stammered, mascara running. Stefan's voice was calm, almost soft. "I didn't do anything to you. I stopped doing for you what you never appreciated." Scott's face fell as he realized the truth. The foundation of Madison's self-made story had been built on Stefan's sacrifices. Stefan felt no pleasure, just clarity, the kind that comes from finally refusing to carry someone else's narrative. Elena reached for his hand. "Are you okay?" Stefan nodded. For the first time, he didn't feel guilt or anger. He felt free. Not from them, but from the burden he'd carried in silence for years. And Franklin, with all its gossip and judgment, could watch, speculate, and learn the truth at its own pace. Stefan left the boutique without a backward glance. The cold air hit him like clarity, cutting through months of tension. Inside, Madison's cries echoed faintly, a reminder of the truth she'd ignored for years. Stefan didn't rush. He didn't need to. Each step away felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. Elena walked beside him silently, her presence steady. "You okay?" she asked softly. Stefan nodded. For once, he wasn't angry. He wasn't hurt. He was just done. Done being the fixer, the unpaid debt, the silent support. Franklin would gossip. People would whisper. But Stefan realized that their perception didn't matter. What mattered was that he no longer carried anyone else's weight. The car ride back to the hotel was quiet, almost peaceful, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over streets he'd once loved and resented equally. By the time they reached the hotel, Stefan felt a strange lightness in his chest. The chaos he'd orchestrated, taking back the SUV, stopping the loan payments, wasn't revenge. It was freedom. And as he looked out the window at the fading horizon, he understood, letting go of what others take for granted is the first step toward truly claiming yourself. The next morning, Stefan woke to silence. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of Franklin, but calm, deliberate quiet. He brewed coffee, letting the aroma fill the small hotel room, grounding him. For years, he had measured his worth by how much he gave, how much he fixed. Now, he measured by what he kept for himself. Elena sat across from him, scrolling through her phone. "Franklin's buzzing," she said. "They're noticing Madison's boutique, the SUV, people are starting to question the story she's told." Stefan didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. It was truth. He opened his laptop, checking emails and payments one last time. Every transaction, every loan, every gesture of support he'd silently given, it was all documented, all verifiable. The realization hit him again, he had done everything quietly, faithfully, and no one had recognized it. And that was okay. Recognition wasn't the goal anymore. Freedom was. Stefan leaned back, sipping coffee, letting the morning sun warm his face. He wasn't running from Franklin. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was stepping into a life where he chose his battles, his people, his peace. Madison would face consequences. His parents would have their reality check. But Stefan? He finally had space to breathe without guilt pressing down, without loyalty misused. By mid-morning, Stefan decided to take a walk. The city streets of San Francisco were alive, bustling, indifferent, free. He passed cafes and small shops, noticing faces lost in their own worlds. He realized how different this felt compared to Franklin. Back home, every corner held expectations, judgments, and whispers. Here, he could simply exist. Elena joined him, coffee in hand. "You're calm," she said. "After all that drama." Stefan shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. Calm isn't the absence of chaos. It's knowing you've done everything you could and no longer carry what's not yours. He paused near a park, watching a father toss a frisbee to his child. Stefan felt the weight of years, the countless dinners, the unpaid bills, the silent help that had gone unnoticed. He had given, yes, but always silently, always hoping for love or acknowledgement. That hope had kept him tethered. Now, he didn't need it. He opened his phone and typed a quick message to Madison. Not angry, not accusatory. Just facts. The SUV, the loan, the support, it all had limits. He sent it. Then he deleted it, realizing words weren't necessary. Action spoke louder, and the morning sunlight seemed to confirm that. For the first time in a long time, Stefan felt unshackled. He wasn't leaving chaos behind, he was stepping into clarity. He had no obligation to fix others at the expense of his own peace. By afternoon, Stefan returned to his hotel, his thoughts quiet but focused. He opened his laptop again, not for revenge, not for anger, but to take control of what was his life. The boutique's files, the bank emails, the SUV documents, they were all evidence of years of unseen labor. Now, they were also proof that he could step away without guilt. He reviewed each transaction, each payment, and a strange satisfaction washed over him. Not satisfaction at causing pain, but at reclaiming his autonomy. For too long, he had carried others' burdens silently. Now, the silence belonged to him. Elena watched, quietly supportive. "You're handling this better than I expected," she said. Stefan smirked. Better than expected doesn't mean easy. It means necessary. He leaned back, thinking of Madison. She had believed she could rewrite the story of her success without acknowledging his part. That was her choice. And for the first time, Stefan realized he didn't need her acknowledgement to validate his own life. The sun dipped lower outside, casting long shadows across the hotel room. Stefan felt a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just stepping away from his family's illusions, he was stepping into a life defined by his own boundaries. And for the first time in decades, that freedom felt like home. By evening, Stefan decided it was time to leave the hotel room and face the town, but not to confront anyone. He walked Franklin's quiet streets, noticing the small-town normalcy that had once felt suffocating. Shops closing, streetlights flickering on, neighbors greeting each other casually. Life moved on, indifferent to personal betrayals. His phone buzzed, another message from Elena. The boutique is chaos. Madison's crying, Scott's yelling. Are you sure you're okay? Stefan smiled faintly, thumbs hovering over the screen. Yes, he was okay. More than okay. For years, he had held the weight of expectations, loans, and silent support. Now, releasing them wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. He stopped outside a cafe, breathing in the evening air. The cold didn't bite, it cleared. Memories of childhood struggles, the unspoken debts, the constant need to fix everything, all seemed distant now. The small house, the tight money, the whispered fears, he had carried them alone for years, but not anymore. Stefan opened his laptop briefly, checking the SUV and loan updates. Everything he had quietly supported for years now had consequences he didn't have to control. And that realization didn't bring joy or revenge. It brought balance. Elena appeared beside him, noticing the calm in his eyes. "You've changed," she said softly. Stefan nodded. "I'm done carrying what's not mine to bear. It's time I live my life, fully, for me and not for them." The evening in Franklin wrapped around him, quiet yet charged with a sense of possibility. Stefan realized that stepping away wasn't losing, it was finally reclaiming the person he had always been beneath the weight of others' expectations. Stefan returned to his hotel, letting the quiet of the room settle around him like a protective shield. He didn't feel anger anymore, just a sharp, clear focus. Every bit of effort, every dollar sent home, every late-night worry for Madison and the family, it had led to this moment of understanding. He no longer carried their denial or entitlement. He pulled out his phone again. Messages, calls, notifications, some from friends, some from neighbors. Everyone curious, talking, guessing. He ignored them. There was no satisfaction in gossip, no need to explain himself. The truth was his own, and he didn't owe anyone else validation. Stefan opened a blank document on his laptop. Words flowed easily now, not about what had been taken, but about what he had gained: clarity, independence, and the freedom to finally choose for himself. The story he had lived was messy, unfair, and painful, but it was also real. And real was enough. He poured a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched Franklin fade in the evening glow. The town that once felt like a cage now seemed distant, almost like a story from someone else's life. He could leave it behind without guilt, without fear. Elena peeked in, quiet but present. "What now?" she asked softly. Stefan smiled, a rare, calm smile. "Now, I live my life. On my terms. I've done enough for others, I need to do for me." And in that simple decision, Stefan felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of silence, obligation, and erased contributions lifted. He was free, finally, to breathe, think, and exist for himself alone. The next morning, Stefan woke early, the sunlight spilling through the blinds like a quiet promise. He didn't rush, didn't check messages or news. Today was about planning, not reacting. He wanted structure, control, something he'd long sacrificed for a family that never fully appreciated it. He reviewed his finances first. The boutique loan, the SUV repossession, everything he'd let slide for years now settled under his own authority. There was no panic, no regret. Only a measured calm. Stefan realized he had built more than he'd known. His work, his savings, his independence, these were his pillars. And no one could take that from him. Next, he drafted a plan for the coming months. He would invest in himself, pursue opportunities he delayed, reconnect with friends he had neglected, and most importantly, set boundaries with the people who had used him. It wasn't cruelty, it was self-respect, long overdue. A knock on the door startled him. Elena stepped in, carrying a coffee and a small smile. "You okay?" she asked. Stefan looked up, meeting her gaze. "Better than okay. I finally feel like I belong to myself," he said. Elena nodded, understanding more than words could convey. Silence filled the room, but it was comfortable, not heavy. For the first time in years, Stefan felt he had the space to breathe fully, to live authentically, without the weight of others' expectations or entitlement pressing down on him. Outside, Franklin continued its small-town rhythm, unaware of the shifts in the lives of those within it. Stefan no longer needed its approval or validation. He had taken back his story, rewritten the rules, and finally claimed the life that was his to live. By late afternoon, Stefan decided to leave the hotel and walk through the streets of Franklin. The town felt smaller now, as if he had grown too big for it, or maybe he had just finally seen it clearly. People waved, smiled, but none knew the storm that had passed in his life over the last 24 hours. He stopped at the boutique from afar, observing Madison struggling with the reality of her crumbling facade. Stefan felt no rush to intervene. She had built her empire on borrowed support, and now she was facing the consequences of her choices. There was no satisfaction in this. Only a quiet acknowledgement: actions have weight, and every decision ripples out, whether we like it or not. Stefan's phone buzzed again. Elena, checking in. "Are you sure you're okay being out there?" she asked. He replied, "I've never been more okay. Watching it all, I see what I was blind to for years. And now, I don't have to carry it." With each step, Stefan felt lighter. Every memory of sacrifice, every sleepless night, every hidden payment, none of it was wasted. It had built him, strengthened him, and led him to this clarity. Franklin might never understand him, but he understood himself. For the first time in years, Stefan smiled without hesitation. Not a smile for anyone else, not for recognition or approval, but a smile for the freedom he had carved with patience, strategy, and self-respect. Stefan returned to the hotel, the streets quiet now, the sunset painting Franklin in muted gold. He didn't feel the urge to call anyone, not his parents, not Madison. Their voices, their expectations, even their anger, no longer had power over him. For the first time, he was acting entirely for himself. He opened his laptop again, not out of obligation, but to plan his next steps. The SUV repossessed. The boutique loan redirected. Every thread of his silent support untangled, exposing the truth behind Madison's self-made image. He didn't relish her panic or the whispers in town. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming control over his own life. Elena walked in, quiet but present. "So, what now?" she asked softly. Stefan looked up, a calm resolve in his eyes. "Now, I live for me. No more carrying others' mistakes, no more unpaid debts of gratitude. I protect myself first. And if anyone finally notices my absence, that's their lesson, not mine." He leaned back, stretching, feeling an unfamiliar lightness. Franklin might gossip, might speculate, but he had built walls strong enough to shield himself. Not walls of bitterness, but doors he could choose to open or close. And tonight, every door that once drained him was firmly shut. Stefan smiled again, this time wider, freer. The city awaited, the horizon stretched endless, and he was ready. The next morning, Stefan woke to the hum of San Francisco, a city that never paused, never waited. The skyline glittered, but he hardly noticed. Today wasn't about the view, it was about the freedom to finally breathe. His phone buzzed, messages from old friends, colleagues, even Elena, checking in. He read them calmly, replying only when he wanted. No obligation, no guilt. He thought about Franklin, about Madison scrambling with the boutique, about the whispers of the town. For a moment, a flicker of old worry appeared. But then he shook his head. That weight wasn't his anymore. Years of silent support, of being the invisible anchor, had ended. He'd given all he could, and the rest was not his responsibility. At work, Stefan focused on a new project, coding with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Every line of code was precise, deliberate, satisfying. Elena popped into his office for coffee. "You're glowing," she said, smiling. Stefan laughed softly, a sound light and unburdened. "Feels good to finally stop carrying everyone else's storm." By evening, he took a walk along the bay. The water reflected the golden sunset, calm and steady. Stefan let the wind brush against his face, letting go of the years of silent suffering. Franklin could gossip. Madison could rebuild or stumble. It didn't matter. He had claimed his peace, and for the first time in a long time, he felt entirely, completely it himself. Night fell over San Francisco, lights flickering across the bay. Stefan sat on his balcony, holding a warm mug, thinking about how quiet life had become without the constant chaos from Franklin. The silence wasn't empty, it was healing. He finally understood that peace wasn't about avoiding conflict, it was about choosing what to carry. A notification buzzed on his phone. Madison had posted again, this time pleading for support, trying to explain herself to the town. Stefan scrolled past without a flicker of anger. Her story wasn't his to fix anymore. The years of guilt, the sleepless nights, the unseen sacrifices, they were lessons, not chains. He had done his part. That was enough. Elena joined him on the balcony, carrying 2 cups. "You're really letting go," she said quietly. Stefan nodded, letting the steam rise from the mug warm his face. "I don't need their validation anymore," he admitted. "I've been the silent backbone for too long. Now, I just exist for myself." They sipped coffee together, watching the waves roll in. The city pulsed with life, but Stefan's world had slowed to a rhythm he controlled. He realized that boundaries weren't cruel, they were liberation. And for the first time, he wasn't just surviving or fixing, he was living. Sunrise painted San Francisco in soft gold. Stefan stood by his window, watching the city wake, feeling a calm he hadn't known in years. Franklin's drama, Madison's lies, his parents' rejection, it all felt like a chapter he'd finally closed. The weight he carried for decades was gone, replaced by clarity. He opened his laptop one last time to draft a personal note to himself: "I am enough. I am free. I choose me. No audience, no approval, no guilt, just truth." Elena smiled beside him, sensing the peace radiating from him. "You finally get to breathe," she said. Stefan nodded, letting the moment settle deep in his chest. The phone buzzed again. It was Franklin. Stefan ignored it. He wasn't running away, he was stepping forward, into a life built on his own terms. The boutique, the SUV, the loans, they were no longer his responsibility. Each loss he had endured, each silence he bore, had forged strength, not weakness. Stefan took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. Today wasn't about revenge, or even victory. It was about reclaiming himself. His life, his peace, his boundaries. And for the first time in years, he smiled, not at anyone else, but at himself. The past could whisper, but it could no longer dictate his story. He turned away from the window, ready to live for the first time without compromise, without apology. Freedom wasn't loud, it was quiet, steady, and utterly his.